Our speaker tonight grew up in Florida, and the ocean has always been a huge part of her life. She learned to drive a boat before she could drive a car. Rather than babysitting to earn money, she sold crabs and fish that she collected in the waters around her house. And she signed up for her first scuba lesson on her 16th birthday. Marilou majored in biology and marine science, and later studied marine science and coral reef ecology. While at Eckerd College, she volunteered with the search and rescue team, where she trained with the Coast Guard and even got to jump out of helicopters to search a few capsized vessels. She continues to dive and connect with others who love the ocean and leads several annual excursions to the shipwrecks off of the North Carolina coast. So please join me in welcoming our past SeaDevil president, Marilou Maglione. Now I'm going to mute myself and turn it all over to you.
So thank you all for coming out. I am so delighted to be able to continue to share my love for the ocean, but also my love for the North Carolina coast and the wreck diving. I have been diving there for over 30 years, actually 38 years. I did the math today, so I'm dating myself. But I believe it's one of the best dive locations on the planet. And if you haven't experienced it, I hope you'll be intrigued enough after today to join me. So what I would like to do today is introduce you to the graveyard of the Atlantic. And tell you about like where it is regionally in case you're not quite sure, talk about some of the wrecks, the amazing sea life, and then how to join the adventure. And Carolyn's going to help me a little bit because she joined this adventure, these trips about, this will be her 4th year. And I was delighted that she would be willing to share her perspective. All right, so let's start with where are we talking about? So the Outer Banks of North Carolina are really divided into northern and southern Outer Banks. And that dividing line occurs at Cape Hatteras. And north of Cape Hatteras is normally colder waters and not nearly as popular. And then the southern Outer Banks go down to Cape Fear. So where we dive is right in the middle, and that's off of Cape Lookout. Now, all these capes along the Outer Banks in these barrier islands were refuge for ships passing before World War I, and then during the war, World War I and World War II, a lot of ship traffic out there in these waters. You'll notice on this diagram, which is the distribution of wrecks along the North Carolina coast, that most of these wrecks are between Cape Hatteras and Cape Lookout. And a lot of the older wrecks that met their fate here were trying to navigate out of storms, etc., and get into Pamlico Sound. And I don't know if you can see, no, not, you can't see the courier, but or the cursor, but Pamlico Sound is that light blue area there. And to get into it for safe harbor, you'd have to go through the Ocracoke Inlet. And so why are there so many wrecks here? Well, there's a lot going on. So just north of Cape Hatteras, we have the Labrador Current coming down, and that's cold water. And the warm water of the Gulf Stream comes up and meets there around Cape Hatteras. And so we got a lot of swirling currents and those cause the sands to shift. So there's shifting shoals that mariners often have trouble with. You know, 1 month it's good to go, and next month you're on a sandbar. Also, there's lots of storms. We know that almost every year there's at least a big blow down there of sorts, and now and then a hurricane. This is also a major shipping route up the eastern seaboard. So these wrecks are from the Civil War all on up through World War II, as well as just other maritime disasters. So there's estimated to be over 2,000 wrecks along the eastern seaboard. Kind of mind-boggling, isn't it? So we are going to focus on this little region and the area here that that I've been visiting, like I said, for almost 38 years. So this little group of wrecks, you'll see quite a few wrecks here, but of this group, there's 10 that are the most visited. Now, to those who are wreck diving enthusiasts and sticklers for proper terminology, there are wrecks and then there are reefs. Who knows the difference? Artificial reefs. What's the difference? Yes. So an artificial reef or a boat at the bottom that was sunk on purpose is technically not a wreck. Okay, we call them all wrecks here, but technically a shipwreck is something that met its fate due to storm or unintentional sinking. So
does that count for World War II wrecks where they intentionally sunk it?
Funny. As a matter of fact, yes. So of these wrecks that we visit most often, 7 of 10 of them are true wrecks that met their fate in World War I or World War II, or in the case of the Sloyd, it collided with wreckage from World War II and sunk as a result of that. So what I've done here today to help you get more acquainted with the area is I've divided the wrecks that we visit into the 3 locations that we have to make choices to go to when we're planning our dives for the day. So the inshore wrecks are those that are to the west of Beaufort, and Beaufort is you can see the yellow dot there where Beaufort's right inside a little pass there, just above where the label for Theodore Parker is. So we would head out of that pass and pretty much head south. It's a short drive, and those wrecks are pretty easily accessible. And then we have the offshore southern wrecks. And that's a group of wrecks that are pretty much due south of Beaufort, and it's a little longer ride, and we get into some deeper water. And of those wrecks, I'll be highlighting a couple of our favorites. And then offshore east. And the 2 wrecks that we routinely visit out there, and my favorites, are the Carib Sea and the Atlas. And if we head out east, those are the 2 options that we will have. So before I go into more detail about the wrecks, I thought I'd interject here. How do we get there? And so when I first went to the Outer Banks, like I said, about 38 years ago, a dive instructor buddy of mine invited me up from Florida, and I was diving the Gulf of Mexico all the time. And he said, you've got to come see the North Carolina coast. So I left Florida to go dive in North Carolina and thought, yeah, okay, I'll check it out. And I was hooked. We went out on a 6-pack named Jaws, and I dove with that group a couple times a year for about 5 years, and then the captain retired, and I had to find another dive operator in the area because now I was addicted. And so that's when I met the folks at Discovery. They've been in business about 33 years now, and so if I was one of I started diving with them not too long after they opened. In fact, the same owner still owns it. So they've gone through multiple boats, and they don't actually own these boats. They contract with the captains and the owners of these boats. And so now we dive on primarily the Outrageous 5. And there's also a smaller 6-pack boat. So, you know, if there's just a few of us and we want to go out for a day, we can sometimes get on the 6-pack. So a typical dive day, let me just describe that briefly so that as I talk about the dive sites, you'll have an idea of how we do this. So it's a large enough boat that we can take 18 divers and crew. And there's Beamer, she's crew. She's the captain's dog, and she's an awesome dive companion. Anyway, the captain and 2 crew who are also captains at minimum are aboard. And we have a nice big cabin down below, great dive deck that's covered, and then a sun deck and a great place to, you know, relax and have lunch. When we anchor up, we use a Carolina rig. And that's pretty important because it allows the divers to get in the water. We'll do a giant stride off the port side of the boat, and you can go down onto the hang line that's between 10 and 15 feet. Make sure everything's okay, wait for your buddy, and then you head down the line to the anchor line, which will be attached to the wreck. The crew will guarantee that there is a wreck at the end of that anchor line. If you choose not to follow it, you may not see the wreck. So we always advise that everybody go down the anchor line. When you come back up in reverse, you can hang out on the hang line as long as you want, do your safety stop. Sometimes there's a lot of entertainment with barracuda. Sometimes with the thermocline, if it's up high, we'll see sharks right under the boat, and you can hang out with them. The out 5 also has nice fins on ladders, so you don't have to, you know, really struggle to get your fins onto the ladder. You just move your leg out to the side, and it's a much easier climb. All right, so that's how we do it. Oh, also one other picture here, the bottom picture there. Not only can you see the hang line, but this thing right here, there's a extra reg hanging overboard. So if you do find yourself in a low air situation, you can still do your safety stop safely by using their extra air.
Unless the sharks started using it.
Well, normally that's where the barracuda hang out. All right, so so the surface intervals are fun. I thought these would be some a great way to show you, you know, it's a long day because we're going offshore, and so you bring your food and try to and relax. But there's plenty of room, and we usually get up on the deck and share food, and sometimes we have some great entertainment during the surface interval. So I always bring a snorkel. So if it's nice and calm and I see interesting things, I can jump in and take pictures. One day there were cannonball jellyfish everywhere, and I had a ball taking pictures of them. So you just never know what you're going to see, even on the surface interval. All right, so that's how we do the diving. And Carolyn and I will go through some more details in a little while on preparing, etc. So we're out there on the out 5, and we have picked inshore wrecks. So going to the inshore wrecks, a lot of people don't like them because they are often, the viz is not often as good, okay? And it can be a little colder because it doesn't get as much of the Gulf Stream water. However, when the Gulf Stream does move in, I advocate to go there. And I think some people have been very pleasantly surprised when I've convinced them to go to the Indra on a day when we've had, 80 to 100-foot viz, and they could see how beautiful that wreck was. So one of the first wrecks I'm going to talk about there is the Ario. I'm still getting used to calling it that. We normally call it the Hutton. And the Hutton was a tanker, big tanker, and over 400 feet. And it was operating up the coast and coming from the Gulf of Mexico, and it was torpedoed. It was struck by the U-boat, the U-158, and it did manage to send out a distress signal, but after that, the survivors were stuck in the water for a while, and but luckily 30 sailors survived. The wreckage later became such a hazard to navigation that they had to drag it. So it's kind of a rubbly wreck. But when we go there, we often find a lot of goodies. And these are shark's teeth that we really found in the area when we did a Megtooth trip right in the area of the Hutton. And I have actually found shark's teeth in fact, there was one trip, I think Chip, you were there, and I came back and I had a shark's tooth. So got to keep your eyes out for fun things like that. All right, the Indra. This is the most dived inshore wreck. There's a lot to see, and when the viz is good, I just love taking people there. This is actually not a wreck, it's an artificial reef. It was sunk intentionally in 1992 as part of the artificial reef program. And this was a ship that did serve in the war, and then it later went to monitor and maintain river boats, patrol boats in Vietnam. And then it came back to Morehead City, where it was decommissioned and turned into this great dive site. So here are some pictures of the Indra. It's spectacular on a good day. And when you have 60 foot to the sand and about 30 foot to the top of the deck, you get really long, dive times. So yes, there's some particulate matter in the water. It's, not crystal clear when it's blown up here, but you can still appreciate, how wonderful of an experience it could be to just take your time and leisurely stroll around this lovely wreck. And it has some nice swim throughs and places to explore safely. Let's see, I thought I hit. Here we go. So yes, swim throughs galore. And here, there's a diver up on the hang line. That's how clear the water was that day. So you could just hang out there and look down and appreciate the view. All right. Next, offshore south. So heading to these wrecks takes longer. It's about 1.5 to 2 hours. And the depths of the dives range from about 90 feet from the superstructure down to about 120 in the sand. The average viz is about 30 to 50 feet. But again, when that Gulf Stream water rolls in, it can be close to 100 feet. We see a lot of larger animals out here, and then the bigger bait balls. When we come out here, we try to pair up the dives so that we make the most of the weather. So we often don't leave the dock knowing exactly where we go. What the captain will say, oh, let's poke our head out and see what's happening, because sometimes you just don't know. And the weather forecasts are not always 100% accurate. You just and you can have microclimates. Okay, so sometimes the weather may look beautiful, but another dive boat may be reporting heavy current on a particular wreck or something like that. So as we are heading out, they're still determining sometimes where we're going to go, but they usually ask us, the dive group, with the most divers on board, what's your choice? Like, where would you like to go? So out on, for the south side, the most popular destination and what draws people from all over the world actually is the U-352. There's very, very few U-boats that are diveable by sport divers that are this intact. So it's something that everybody wants to see. So we try to get there at least one time during the summer. Now, if you dive the U-352 as your first dive, because of its depth, we don't go there for the second dive. So we'll try to look at the weather and see, okay, which day over this weekend can we make it to the 352? Probably the most popular wreck out in this area is the Aeolus, and I've featured that one. The Spar, that is a artificial reef, which was a Coast Guard cutter. It's a much smaller wreck. It's still very new, doesn't have a lot of life on it, and if you've got a big boat full of divers, it feels a little crowded. So we often don't go there if we have other options. Sometimes if the diving's good on the Aeolus, we'll just stay there for 2 dives. Another a choice that I like to suggest is the Shures. I really love the Shures, and that is a wreck that I often advocate for because there's a lot of life there and some good superstructure. All right, so let's talk about the Aeolus. So the Aeolus, I'm sorry, I'm blind. The Aeolus was it's a cable layer, and it was a very large boat, so over 400 feet. And again, sunk in as part of the artificial reef program. But when she was first sunk, she was pretty much intact. And this is one of the cool things that I've experienced since I've been diving there so long. When I first dove the Aeolus, she was intact. So it's kind of interesting for me to see the evolution of some of these wrecks over the decades. And that's been kind of fun. You know, they change slowly. So, but when you have a big storm, for example, the Aeolus was broken apart in a hurricane, and now she's in 3 pieces with like a rubbly wreckage in between the stern and the bow. So the bow and the stern are really 2 separate dive sites now. And if we have to share the dive site with another dive boat, usually the first one to get there gets the stern, and then the other dive boat gets the bow. But if the diving's good and we anchor up to the stern, we'll stay there often for 2 dives. And that stern section is known as the having a special feature that people sometimes call the Sand Tiger Ballroom. And basically that's where the cable that was in the hold would come up through the deck. So this is where the cable came up and would feed out of the hole at the top of the hull and then be paid out as the ship moved along, and then that cable would be laid along the bottom. So you can safely dive down into the hole, etc., with, of course, proper training. Because this was prepared as an artificial reef, they've taken out a lot of the hazards that you might find in a wreck that was not intended to be used for diving. So in the Aeolus, throughout the deck, it's fun to swim where people used to walk. And so as you walk or swim around these decks, you know, you can kind of imagine how the sailors would move around, and you see the stairs. There's couldn't find the picture, but there's even a commode that's sitting there. So that's a lot of fun. This is my dive buddy, Chris. here in the picture.
You need to tell them this one in here, not the one.
Oh, yes. Sasquatch. All right. So a lot of swim throughs and a lot of opportunities to, if you're quiet, to see sharks kind of come in and circle around in these swim throughs. Okay. Something you may see on some of the wrecks out there are these little blue markers, or they look like they're like a tag. They're from the aquarium, and they're actually have sensors in them that pick up tagged shark signals, so that they can kind of count the sharks that have been tagged as they cruise between the various wrecks. All right, the famous U-boat. Okay, the most famous wreck on the Crystal Coast. I believe it was discovered by, I may not say his name right, so if any history buffs in here know his name, Purefoy. Yes, and he owns or owned Olympus Dive Center, and so they discovered this wreck after years and years and years of looking for it, and had it all mapped out, and for a long time they hid the numbers, and now of course everybody knows where it is. And again, it's a huge draw. There's not a lot of superstructure. It's 115 to the sand, and you know, if you stay up around the conning tower, you know, you're still at about 100 feet, so it's, you don't get tons of bottom time, but it's certainly worth seeing. And I try to get people there at least once a season, like I said. Easy to circumnavigate. It's a long tube, and it's only 200 feet long. And if it's calm and not a lot of current, you can circle it twice in a dive and not even swimming hard. Okay, so this was a day 2 summers ago when the Viz was over 100 feet. And so I apologize for the way some of these are showing on the screen, because on the computer, they certainly don't look that washed out, but it's so impressive when you can see the whole thing. And yeah,
Don't forget, it's war memorial.
absolutely.
There's still
Yes,
big,
there are still sailors inside, or what is, you know, their remains are probably long been.
there's no penetration.
No, absolutely not. So, and there is no harvesting of anything off of these wrecks. Even when I get to one of my favorite wrecks, I'll tell you about that, but even taking rocks and things, there are some things you can take, like shark's teeth and shells and things like that, but we don't take any metal or pieces of the wreck. Years and years ago, people would go down with their tool sets and take, portholes and whatever, dishes, etc. And that when some of these wrecks were out of reach to the average sport diver, you know, the tech divers that could do the deeper wrecks, and you know, they took souvenirs. Now that's more frowned upon, and so we respect these as war memorials. Thank you for pointing that out.
One of my guides down there was the first place I saw a lionfish.
Oh,
And in fact, I saw a male that had his harem. He came off base and all that. I got a really good picture.
wow. Well, now sadly they're everywhere, and if you do want to eat some fresh lionfish, the boat supplies the Hawaiian sling and a holder and all, and they'll teach you how to do it. And last summer we had fresh lionfish for dinner. I think I filleted like 8 or 9 lionfish, and we had some fresh Alex got to taste it. All right. Okay, so this is, these are more pictures from the U-352. There's Chris, Kathleen, Alex, they were doing a deep class. This is, that's Shushan up there, and another buddy of mine, Keith. And so that was just a spectacular dive day on the U-352. If you look in the nooks and crannies, you'll see that things like morays and other creatures that have claimed holes in the reef. Again, or in the wreck, not a lot of big life here, because again, it doesn't support it without the superstructure. But now and then you'll see sand tigers and things cruising by. Okay, offshore east. The captain will tell you that if they ask me where I want to go, what am I going to say? Care of Sea. And if they ask me again, I'm going to say Care of Sea. It's my absolute favorite wreck on the planet. Now, granted, I haven't been to, thousands of wrecks, but there is so much to love about this wreck, and I hope I can convey that. So you'll notice that the average depths here in offshore east, it's about 80 feet. So it's kind of mid-range between the inshore and the offshore south, which means we get decent bottom times. Now, the problem with going to the east sometimes, and the reason the captain might say, nobody's been out there for a few days because there was a storm and we're not sure how it is, because once you head out, you're committed. There's nothing else out there to dive on. So unlike heading south, if the Schurz isn't any good, we try the Aeolus, and we have some other choices. But it's worth the risk. And there's been a couple of times when the captain said, it's probably 50-50. What do you want to do? And we said, we take a vote and we end up going there, and it's spectacular. So if you hear me recommend the Care of Sea, I hope that you'll trust me on that would be a good choice for the day. It's hard to have a bad dive there, even if the viz isn't great, because there's just so much to see, and I'll show you some cool things later. Now, this is where the largest shiver of sand tigers are. And a shiver is just a huge, it's the name for a big school of sharks. And I've never seen schools of sharks bigger than what I've seen here. And the bait fish, and even things like mantas. So when we go out east, we've got these two choices, the Atlas and the Care of Sea. I love the Atlas as well. And actually my vote is usually, let's do the Atlas first and then the Care of Sea second. The Care of Sea is a small wreck, and it's only a little bit bigger than the sub, about 260 feet. And it was sunk in World War II by a U-boat, the 158, and she was sailing from Cuba to Norfolk and carrying manganese, and you can still find manganese chunks down on the wreck. So she was struck by 2 torpedoes on the starboard side, and you can see she's pretty broken up as a result of that. The crew didn't have any time to launch lifeboats, and they jumped overboard, and they just hung on to the wreckage. And then about 10 hours later, the few survivors, only 7 out of 28 were rescued. And so what we have left here that's large and notable chunks of this wreck are 2 big boilers. And then in this picture here, it's like a electric engine. It's a big engine mount that sits up pretty high, and it's amidships, and we're looking towards the bow. For some reason, the sand tigers love hanging out off the bow of the Carib Sea. And you'll often see them just hanging out up there. So I always tell people, when you're on this wreck, you're tempted to be looking down because there's a lot of rubble down there, but look up and you'll be amazed. So when you do look up, that's what you may see. Just as far as the eye can see, sharks just lazily swirling around. Okay, this shark right here is just hanging there, and it's hard to see in this picture, but there is a cleaning fish going in and out of her gills, and I have it on video. This picture's not great because I took it out of a video. I wasn't sure how well all the videos would play, but I was sitting right next to her for minutes, just watching this cleaner fish go in and out of her gills, and it was fascinating. So I'll mention here that sand tigers are very unique in that they're the only shark that actually goes up to the surface and gulps air and holds it in their stomach as a way of adjusting their buoyancy. So during the day, when they're not hunting, they pick a spot that they want to like hang out in, the depth, and they're kind of in a stupor or torpor, and they just lazily swim around. So sometimes you'll look up and one might just be cruising at you. It's not coming for you. You just got in its path and it's just cruising along. And then sometimes it'll startle them because they're just kind of in a bit of a daze, just resting. And so during surface intervals, we often see them come up and gulp. You'll see them now and then. You could be on the hang line and you'll see a shark go up and a little splash, and then it'll head back down. So it just went to get a gulp of air. All right, bait fish galore. So there are times when the bait fish is so thick, it actually blocks out the light and the visibility drops to like feet. You may turn around and your buddy might be completely engulfed. There he is 1 minute and he's almost gone the next. And so it can be a little disorienting, but it's also mesmerizing. It's like watching like a murmuration of starlings. You know, the way these schools of bait fish just undulate and move around. It's fascinating. Those are the things that like I like to tell people that these are like National Geographic moments. Like the first time I saw bait fish schooling like that with sharks coming through was on National Geographic. And then coming to North Carolina, you get to see it, and wow, I can experience what these National Geographic guys get to see. This is a little video, and I don't know how well it'll play, so I apologize for any technical issues here. I had some trouble with uploading and downloading some of the videos, so the quality isn't great. But what I want to show here is these are the boilers. And you can see, I wonder if I stop it a second and then restart it. Sorry, folks. Anyway, covered up in fish everywhere you look. I'm sure there's a way to get the great resolution that other presenters get. I'm just not technically that savvy, sorry. But everywhere you look. So now we're coming back around and back into the bait ball. Again, the boilers over here to the left. And you can see how sunny and bright it is up above the bait ball, and under the bait ball, it gets pretty dark. Oh my gosh, that's horrible. I'm so sorry. And there's my buddy again. And there's some of the ribs, the superstructure that's left sticking up. All right. So something else that's really fun is that with all these sand tigers there, if you like shark's tooth collecting, this is the place. A sand tiger loses on average about 1,000 teeth a year, just one shark. And in their lifetime, they can lose over 30,000. So there's no shortage of shark's teeth. I've invented and patented a shark's tooth collecting device. No, I'm just kidding. But I started this a few years ago. It's basically a spice bottle with a flip lid. And I tied a lanyard on it, and I have a clip on the other end. And so anyway, this is the owner of the boat and the captain. And he loved it so much, I made him one. And he can fill a whole bottle in a dive. And it's something he loves to do. So also, I took this picture one day, and later when I looked up close, I noticed, oh, she's ready to lose a tooth. So there's another one that was, I'm sure, fell off shortly after I took the photo.
That's cool.
I know.
And those containers really are awesome. If you don't have a patent, you should, or at the least set up an Etsy page to sell them, because everybody that goes on the trips would buy them.
Thank you. You'll take two? All right. I got orders on
Yes.
my press. Thank you.
I'll take 3.
Okay. Woohoo. I will get right on that. Okay. So the Atlas, this is the sister dive site to the Carib Sea. This was a big tanker, huge, huge, and she's huge. She's over 440 feet long. And again, this one was sunk in the war, and another U-boat, the 552, torpedoed this ship, and the Atlas was carrying about 84,000 gallons of gasoline. So you can imagine a torpedo, gasoline. What I find amazing here is that after the second torpedo hit and lit the gasoline on fire, the sailors had to swim through burning gasoline on the surface of the water, and only 2 of the 34 sailors died that day. I find that pretty incredible. Anyway, so she now sits in about 125 feet of water to the sand, and it's a big wreck. So there's plenty of superstructure. So where we dive is really a midship. See that big, like the deck in the middle? That's the dive site where we anchor up. And you can see in this topographic map here where they've surveyed the wreck, how badly it's broken up mostly from the torpedoes, because there's a little deeper wreck. It's spared damage from most storm action, but storms have also taken their toll. So we don't go to the sand here because most everyone dives nitrox, and the nitrox mix that we dive, it's 30%. That's all the shop there pumps for us. So what do we have to be concerned about with a depth of 125 feet and a nitrox blend of 30%? Yes. So, yeah, so your maximum your max operating depth, okay, due to the enriched air having more oxygen than you should have, over 121 feet. So that's correct. So we don't want to go down to the sand. So we'll stay up around on the superstructure. It gives us more bottom time, and it's safer. Yes. Okay. Now, if you're diving air, this wreck is a little more challenging to get any decent bottom time. All right. So hope this video is better because this is fun. This is a baby shark. So not very often. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking of playing that music, but I spared you all. So the it's very rare to see baby sharks out here, and the Atlas is where I've seen the most. So this is another choppy video. I'm so sorry. I have no idea why it's doing that. But you can see some of the superstructure of the wreck as the shark is like breakdancing. All right, so here's what's cool. I'll spare you the choppy video and go to the next scene. So in October of 2021 is when I took that video, and there's Shelly Collette, my dive buddy that day. And you can see that it's a smaller shark, right? And so when I went back in August to the Atlas and I took this picture, I thought, I think it's the same shark. And you can see this time though, the baby had just eaten a meal. You can see its belly. So it had gotten a meal sometime right before we dove there. So I looked at the spots and kind of blew things up. And so this is how the spot a shark folks and people doing research on sand tigers identify sharks, because their spots are like fingerprints. And so you can see that there's a few markings that indicate that this is the same little baby shark 10 months later. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah. Sand tiger. Yep, they look kind of sinister, but they're very gentle. In fact, I don't think they've ever been implicated in a human attack without being provoked. Like if you grab their tail or whatever. You know of one?
They're used to those.
I have to fact check that. It's where?
Easily.
That's nurse sharks usually is what people step on. Okay, I think I might need to check. He's asking Google right now, I think. Okay. So anyway, what else do we see down there? So when we're on these dives, there's so much going on. We got bait fish and everything, and you can be on the same dive with 10 people and people come up and everybody had a different experience, right? And so, you know, sometimes you come up and people are like, hey, did you see that? And we're like, how big was it? And then somebody's like, it was big. And most of the time, you know, things look bigger underwater. That's not true. But in this case, it was. I was down there with my buddy and turned around, and then this was right there. And I didn't even have the time to really get my camera set or anything, but you can see my buddy there. And look at the perspective. So this was huge. So you just never know what you're going to see out there, which is part of the joy of going back over and over, because every time it's like different enough that it's an amazing experience. Sometimes we also see other sharks that are not sand tigers. This is what? Who knows? Looks kind of like a bull, I heard somebody say, and it's often confused with the bull. Thankfully, it's not. This is a sandbar. They're one of the most common sharks next to the sand tigers off of the Carolina coast. And they're almost always solo. In fact, I've never seen these bigger ones with buddies. And usually they come through quickly and then they're gone. They don't like the commotion, bubbles, any of that.
Sand tigers are listed as number 6.
Okay, well, still it's higher than I thought, but thank you for checking. Okay, I wonder if it's in other seas though, because
they need a lot too.
yes, absolutely. So I mentioned earlier that the sand tigers are kind of resting during the day. So night diving on these wrecks is not really considered that safe, and they don't do it very often. You know, they only take special groups out that are much more experienced and often with the intent of studying, say, feeding behavior, et cetera. So it's very few people and it's very controlled, because you can imagine with a big shiver of sharks like I was showing you that they when they're in their feeding mode, that's a lot of shark's teeth around. Okay, so what else do we see? We see huge schools of Atlantic spadefish and jacks, barracuda. But what amazes people, I think, is when I show them this. Now, all of these are from these wrecks, and I took them myself, so I know that, you know, they're from there. And it's amazing what you will see, especially if you shine a light on it. The colors just come alive. So there's corals. You'll see there's two kinds of hard corals up in that upper, the picture with the angelfish in the upper right, along with like a Gorgonian soft coral. Down here with the lionfish, another Gorgonian in the sea fan family, juvenile angelfish, tangs, butterfly fish, wrasses. It's just, there's so many beautiful tropicals, and a lot of people don't expect that. So if you like the small critters, there's always plenty to see. Lots of other more common fish. These are not your like fancy tropicals, but I point them out because they're fun. That's a soapfish up there. They're one of my favorites, probably because when I first started diving, I had a saltwater aquarium and I caught a baby soapfish and I had him as a pet for a couple of years. So I kind of have a soft spot for them. They call them soapfish because they exude a kind of a mucus that ends up tasting bad to prey. And it also protects them from being smelled. So other fish can't find them when they're resting. In the upper right, those, I believe they're called tom-toms. And they're one of the most common bait fish that form the big schools. And we have damsels, etc. And that is, who knows what that is? Lower right. Oyster toadfish. Oyster toadfish. And they're very common out there. They look grumpy all the time. All right, here's some other common fish. There's triggers, there's who knows what the jailbird or the jailfish is. Sheep's head. And they like to munch on mollusks and crabs and hard things. They have big bony plate for teeth. And then there's lots of different kinds of eels, always looking for eels. So there's color everywhere. If you bring a light, you will not be disappointed. So even on a bright sunny day, bring your light down there with you so you can bring out some of these colors and you can look into nooks and crannies. So just more color. I love pictures. I love taking a picture and then just seeing what colors show up once you flash your strobe or you toss a light on it. Amazing. All right. Little critters. So like I said, sometimes the viz isn't so great. So what do? We dive anyway and enjoy the smaller stuff, little blennies. And look at that. Isn't that the most gorgeous starfish? Little tiny things. There's a flounder. In the middle picture, there's a pen shell, a type of mollusk, and Gorgonian and urchin, all kinds of things going on. So if you're into macro photography, there's tons of stuff to take pictures of. Little Atlantic anemones, and then who knows what that is in the far right there? slipper lobster. Yeah, yeah. And there's no season on them, so you can take them if go on. Now, octopus are one of my favorite critters, so they kind of get a slide of their own, and I'm always looking for octopus. And there is a trick I'll share. If you're looking, when you're swimming around, if you see a pile of shells that just don't look like they just died there, if it looks like they were piled there, start looking for octopus. Because they often go get something, bring it back, and after they finish eating it, they drop the shell right in front of their den, and you'll get to see an octopus. And I think, Chip, you were with me on that trip where one day we were inshore and looking through the rubbly stuff, and I'm always looking for shark's teeth and this and that, and I came up with like 4 baby octopus all over me. And I put a couple in bottles, and I tried to bring them back down after the surface interval. And I was so happy because one was alive, and I opened the jar to let it out. And as soon as it came out, a jack swooped by and ate it. And I was like, anyways, so, all right. So, anyway, with that, I would like to turn this over to my friend and dive buddy, Carolyn, for a few minutes to share her experiences coming out to dive with me. Okay.
Hi. Hey, has anybody not done this that's in the room? Not done this trip? Okay, good. I didn't. Okay, well, I'm Carolyn, and this is going to be my 4th year going. And after being at one of these meetings, sorry, here I am. Hi. I was like, oh, I don't think I can do this. It's too advanced. So I heard Marilou talk about it. I'm like, yeah, I can do this, because I went and got certified there and at the quarry. So I did a dual search, went to the quarry, learned how to do a wreck dive, tie off, things like that, learned how to use the equipment, bought the equipment, figured out how to put the equipment on myself. It's a lot of like pieces, and so when I first went down there, I had a person from Dive Connections who was my instructor. So that was really great. And then over the years, this has really helped me become a better diver, because it's given me this impetus to want to learn to do more. So,
I stuck that in to help you with your glasses.
Oh, okay, yeah. So a couple of things that it's really important to know is to be prepared. And for me, I get seasick. Anybody else? Yeah, it's real fun. So, it's these are great. If you ever, I know they look ridiculous, but who has tried these?
Those are awesome.
Yes.
Those are awesome.
Kathleen, yeah. So, they work. They keep it. There's little fluid here, and they keep you looking at the horizon and not. It's tricks your mind, and you don't get seasick, or I don't. But you can also use scopolamine patch, and I highly recommend that, because anybody who's chummed on these trips, it's a long surface interval. You're out there all day. So anyway, really important to be prepared for the seas. And then, this is kind of remedial, but it's really important, like, to have the stuff you need on the boat. We leave early, and it's easy to forget. So I write a list, and I have it all laid out, so I don't forget anything, because the last thing I want to do is get out there and not have my blah, 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 right? And then in the ocean, helping get all that equipment, it's really good to practice ahead of time when you say, like, where to put your gear, where do you want that, your SMB, where do you want everything? Practicing. I go to the lake every time about a month before to just practice, because I forget, so that makes me feel more confident in the water when I'm there. Also, going into the water, you go in what's called negative. Anybody know what that means? Because I was always used to, you dive in, you go, oh, I'm good, and let's all go down together. But here you want to go in negative, get down to that, what's the line?
The hang line.
The hang line. So that was a surprise to me. So you really want to make sure your weights are, you know your weights. You're not going to have any time to dink around and try to figure out what your weights should be. That's not a big deal, but it's not a big deal to learn that, but it's important to have that already happening. And then, like I said, practicing. I always practice because, you know, I have about 135 dives under my belt. But, you know, I think it's really important to practice for this one. But even though I do all this, sometimes I run into problems. What is this?
Oh, that's streamlining.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, you don't want to look like that, right? You want to make sure your equipment is the way you want it. Should I go?
Well, the reason I snuck that in there was because there are people who come with every single gadget and then they don't know where to put it and they're diving like a Christmas tree and we're on wrecks and you can get caught up in things. So one of the things that we practice at the lake and that I try to help folks with is streamlining and rigging gear so you're safer and more comfortable.
Yeah, that's not me. But here, you know, so there's some of the equipment and, you know, having a surface marker buoy and knowing how to use it, that's like really cool skill that I never knew really how to do until I went here. So that's what I mean. It's really improved my skills. And you know, Caribbean diving is for me a lot easier than this, but I feel so much more confident now, you know, so it's a great thing. Flashlight, knife, do you want me to go? Gloves are important, you know, going down that line. Sometimes it's got barnacles and stuff on it, you know, you wear the gloves. The John line, you can talk about that.
Yeah.
But some of the problems I have, this is a real bummer. I cannot get the whole shark in my camera. They're just too darn close. It's a real problem. You see, I mean, you know, or I can't see them because there's so many fish, you know, and all I bring down is my little sea life. That's it. I just like a little pocket thing so I can tell people I was there. Another problem I have is there's too many good restaurants in Beaufort. There's too many choices. I dream about this gluten-free pizza like once a month. It's pathetic. And then the really hardest thing, the biggest problem I have is conveying this to other people. I mean, I'm sure you have non-diving friends, yes? And some of you must be crazy. Oh my God, why would you want to see a shark? And oh my God, why would you want to see 100 sharks, right? But it's just such a amazing experience for me. And I just can't tell people about it and get it across. So, all right, that's it for me.
We just did convey it. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, just a couple more minutes of your time. So these were 3 books that Carolyn recommended, and I've read them, and they're fantastic. So if you're interested in history, more about the shipwrecks there, and some divers who have explored some of these wrecks as initial explorers of wrecks newly found, there's a couple books to check out. All right, so real quick, I hope you're interested and now you want to go diving. Oh, absolutely. Good. All right. So, I hope now that this has piqued your interest and you're ready to make some plans to join us. And here are the dates. So we go once a month, except we're skipping June this year. So we'll start out in May. May, July, August, and September. And I believe there are still spots left on every trip. Yep. So please call Dive Connections. Carolyn said she goes to the lake before every trip. So the diver days at the lake are the week before. So it's great timing to come and practice your skills. And then when I'm there, I try to, for those interested, I do what's called a rec prep thing. It's something I kind of created. It's about an hour and a half. And I help people with rigging their gear and deploying a buoy, deploying a wreck line or a reel, things that you may not have maybe not have done since your class and your advanced class. And this does require an advanced certification. So if you don't have an advanced certification, it's another thing you can arrange at the shop. and nitrox. You do not have to dive with nitrox, but you're spending the time and money to go out there. You want to maximize your bottom time, and the nitrox class is cheap, relatively speaking, and it's an online thing. You can get it done in a few hours, and then we can check you off. All right, so I would like to thank you for allowing me to share my love of the wrecks of North Carolina with you. Okay. Questions? Oh, great question. So the question for those who may not have heard is what type of wetsuit? So it varies season to season, and on the same trip, I may bring layers. I am a big fan of layering. So something like a 3 mil with a thermal layer underneath. There's a couple, like a thin, like shark skin makes something that I like. You have I don't know what something, mine's ancient, but there are some nice warm like layering pieces that don't add a lot of buoyancy. So for example, if we end up going inshore, I'm going to layer up because those waters are a little bit cooler. But then if we go out offshore, I might only need my 3 mil. Okay. In May, I'll probably bring my 5 mil. Okay. Yes. Right. But then most of the middle of like midsummer, July, August, and even into September, a 3 mil is just fine. Yeah, and a hooded vest. I'm a big fan of a like a beanie. This is a little neoprene beanie. You know, just having a little protection on your head, in addition to keeping, you know, my mop out of the way, it just adds enough extra warmth. Yeah.
Since you've been diving this over such a long amount of time, so growth, you've seen growth, depth, how you've seen the difference in the below these.
So that's a good question. The corals there are not nearly as abundant. They're much more like little pockets of encrusting coral. So I honestly can't say that they have experienced any significant like bleaching events or whatever. And by the way, my master's thesis was on coral bleaching. So it's one of the things I tend to look for. And no, I don't see the, you know, swaths of like dying.
The waters are a lot cooler.
Yes, and these are more cool water corals. They're not like the tropical corals, so they're much more adapted to fluctuations in temperature. Any other questions? Yeah. Oh, yeah. So they've played musical wrecks now. So the Ario used to be called the Hutton. The Papoose is now the Hutton. Okay, so the Hutton, what they thought was the Hutton is the Ario, and now what they thought was the Papoose is the Hutton, and what they thought was the Papoose is now I can't remember, the Normandia or so, whatever. But anyway, there's always not always, but often some doubt as to what some of these wrecks were because they were so badly damaged being torpedoed. So
Was a six pack captain's lady?
yes, 6-pack is the captain's lady. Yep. Leroy has been running that boat there for about
Ages.
35 years, and he's still at it. Yeah.
Great.
There's shark teeth on your hand?
Yes. Yes, yes. Those are meg teeth. So there are ancient shorelines that used to be where the water level, sea level was. And so now as sea level has risen over the millennia, those submerged ledges, especially after a storm, great time to go shark's tooth hunting. And if you're looking specifically for shark's teeth, look for other fossils. Like when you see other fossils, it's a good place to keep looking for the teeth. Oh yeah, you can. Yep. You can pick those up, shark's teeth, empty shells. Now, sometimes it might look empty, so when you get up on deck, sometimes I tell people, bring it up and then watch it carefully, because if you do find a stowaway, then you can still toss it back over and hopefully it'll live. Anything else? Okay, thanks, everybody. All right, thank you so much. We'll see you again May 10th. Appreciate it. Bye, everybody online. Thank you for joining.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Guys.
Bye.
Thanks. That was wonderful.
Great job.
Thank you.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Bye, Mary Lou.
Well done, Frau
Can't wait to
Schminks.
hear all about it.
Very good, Frau Schminks.
Yes. How do I stop this thing?